Good morning, everybody. Pastor Nate Borman here, one of the pastors at Mount Lebanon Lutheran Church, here for a daily devotional thought. I'm here to jump into God's Word with you. We're in Genesis 39 and 40 today. We're not here every day, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday, about 8 a.m. I can't guarantee Wednesday. I'll be a little bit late on Wednesday, that's for sure. I have an early morning appointment that I need to make. So I'll be a little bit late on Wednesday, but I will get to this eventually, maybe 8:30 or 9 or around there. So no promises, but just look for it later on in the day. We're looking at Genesis 39 and 40 today, and one of the things I want to show you about this section, these two chapters of Genesis, is God is present even when it seems like He's not. God is present even when it seems like He's not. If you've been following along and you've been reading along, and even if you haven't been and you remember the story of Joseph, you can begin to understand where I'm going with this, that Joseph in his life, it hasn't gone the way that any young person, Joseph is 17, it hasn't gone the way that any young person would want their life to go. If you turn back just a couple of chapters, you can see that Joseph, he was Dad's favorite, right? Joseph is the favorite son of Jacob, the son of his favorite wife. I mean, there's some problems in there, but this is Joseph. In some ways, he had it good. He was the dad's favorite. He had this special coat from his dad, and yet because of that, his brothers hated him. Right? He had 11 brothers, and they all hated him. Right? You can begin to see the problem with this, can't you? And Joseph had some dreams from God, which again is a pretty cool thing. God gave Joseph dreams about how he was going to be in charge, about how he was going to rule. And Joseph's brothers hated him more. Right? Joseph's life. And there were some good things about his early life, but it didn't go exactly the way that he wanted it to go. And Joseph's brothers, they hated him so much. You remember this, don't you? They hated him so much that they plotted to kill him, but then in an act of mercy, they spared him and sold him into slavery instead. I'm not sure it was much better, but at least Joseph was still alive, right? So things in Joseph's life are not going the way that any young person's life, Joseph was 17, would want them to go. And so we come to Genesis 39, and we pick up where his story left off in chapter 37. He was sold to Potiphar. Potiphar was a chief official in the land of Egypt. And, you know, if you're Joseph, we'll get back to Potiphar in a second. If you're Joseph, how are you feeling right now? You know, your brothers hate you. They sold you. They plotted to kill you. How are you feeling right now? You know, if you're Joseph, how are you feeling about God? How are you feeling about your life? How are you feeling about anything going on? You know, I can imagine a couple of different poles, extremes of emotions. I can imagine on the one hand, both toward brothers, dad, and maybe even God. There's bitterness, anger, resentment. He's upset. He's frustrated. I can imagine this whole host. If you've been hurt, like Joseph's been hurt before, you can understand how angry and hurt and upset you might be at the people who hurt you, and maybe even at God who let it happen. That's one side. The other side of this is maybe a deep depression and despondency and just almost resignation, like you're giving up. Right? You can imagine both of those things in Joseph. But I want you to see something about Joseph. Joseph doesn't give up. He doesn't. You see neither bitterness and anger, or on the other side, you don't see depression, despondency, resignation, right? You don't see either of those things in Joseph's life. Instead, when Joseph is sold to Potiphar, we're back to Potiphar now. Instead, when Joseph is sold to Potiphar, he works hard and he's faithful in his work. He does his very best. He doesn't bitterly kick things when he walks around the house. He works hard. He does his very best, to such an extent that Potiphar says, "Hey, you are such a great worker. I'm going to put you in charge." And then it goes bad for Joseph again, right? Then it goes bad for Joseph again, and Potiphar's wife, she's attracted to him, so she attempts to seduce him, And when Joseph doesn't give in because Joseph's faith, there's something to see here about Joseph's faith with God. Joseph refuses to give in. He says, I can't dishonor God in that way. I can't dishonor my master in this way. And so she accuses him of attempted rape, and Joseph ends up in prison. But again, in Joseph, when he's in prison, you'll get to see this more and more in chapter 40, that Joseph has neither bitterness, anger, or resentment on the one side, and on the other side, he doesn't have depression, despondency, or resignation. He doesn't give up. And even when he's in jail and he interprets the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, and the one forgets about him, even then, right, there's this telling line at the end, near the end of chapter 40, the cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. That's what it says. Even then, Joseph keeps on keeping on, right? Because his eyes are on God, right? If that was you, and this is the way that your life turned, you can imagine how there would be, you can imagine, maybe you've experienced this before, that on the one side there's depression, discouragement, despondency, resignation, or on the other side, bitterness, anger, resentment toward people and God. And maybe some thoughts creep into your mind that, what did I do to deserve this? There comes the depression and despondency, or even, God, how could you, shaking your fist at God in anger and resentment. But I want you to see something about Joseph, that Joseph's faith is on God. And I want you to then also to see something about God. Moses, he's the human author of Genesis chapter 39, 40. He's actually the human author's, he is the human author of all of Genesis. And I want you to see something that Moses emphasizes. And I think he emphasizes it on purpose, because as we see the narrative of Joseph's life unfold, Moses wants to help us to make some connections between Joseph's narrative and our narrative. And the thing that Moses wants us to notice about Joseph's life is that the Lord was with Joseph. I highlighted this in my Bible, and I maybe want you to do the same. Chapter 39, verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 3, the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 5, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, right? You're starting to catch a theme. Verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph. Verse 23, the Lord was with Joseph, right? This theme that gets repeated, at least in Genesis 39, is that the Lord was with Joseph. And I think that's an important thing to see, because if you're Joseph, what are you starting to think? Your brothers have sold you. Potiphar's wife accuses you of rape. You're forgotten in jail. What do you start to think about God? You start to think he's uninvolved. You start to think he's uncaring. You start to think he's not worried about me. But what does Moses want you and I to see? That I really think Joseph understood this by faith. He understood this even when things didn't work that well. But we don't always think this way. So what do you think God's trying to teach us about by watching Joseph's narrative? What does God want us to learn about our narrative? And I think this is at least one of the things, and it's this: that God is with us even when it seems like he's not. That God is with us even when it seems like he's not. See, when life falls apart and when injustice happens, you cannot read Genesis 39 and 40 and say, well, that was fair. There's nothing about what's happened in Joseph's life that's fair, that's just. It's injustice to an extreme. And yet, what does Joseph remain sure of? God is present. God is present with him. And when things fall apart in our life and when injustice happens, what's one of the first things that maybe comes to our mind? Where's God? And so what does Moses want us to learn? He wants us to learn that God is with us even when it seems like he's not. And so he protects us on the one side from anger, bitterness, resentment, and those painful emotions that want to get even at people, right? He protects us from that, because if God is with us and if God is for us, then I don't have to worry about getting back at the people who hurt me. I just have to wait on God and his timing. because God is with us even when it seems like he's not. And what does that do to depression and despondency and resignation? It raises us up from that, because if God is with me, then I'm never alone. And whatever's going to come my way, I don't have to give up, because we're going to see this next weekend as we look at 2 Corinthians. Therefore, we do not give up, right? We do not lose heart. We commit ourselves to following the Lord because God is with us. And that's why it's important for you. And there's so many like offshoots of this truth. And so think about that today. How is the truth that God is with you even when it seems like he's not? How does that help you in the season of life that you're in? How does that inspire you in the season of life that you're in? How does that play out, right? How can you begin to see God more and notice God more and just remember? Sometimes it's just remembering and recalling God is present with us. So take heart today, dear people of God, right? The Lord is with you even when it seems like he's not. Enjoy your reading of God's word. Enjoy digging into Genesis 39 and 40. I'll be back on Wednesday. Again, I'll be a little bit late on Wednesday, probably more like 8:30 or 9 o'clock. But I'll get here eventually. I've got an early morning meeting that I'm going to go to. It's going to be good. So the Lord be with you all and grant you his peace. Have a great day, everybody. The Lord be with you all.